They said the biker was crazy for marrying a black woman with 5 kids, but they had no idea what was coming. A tough biker takes in a struggling mom and her 5 children, and the whole town laughs behind their backs. They say he's lost his mind, that no man would ever choose a family this big, this complicated, this fast. But the biker doesn't care. He's ready to love them, protect them, and fight for them. Then one day, everything changes. A deadly wildfire erupts in the mountains, and the people who mocked them suddenly realize the biker's crazy family might be the only hope they have left. Because one of those kids, trained by the biker himself, steps forward and becomes a hero no one saw coming. But just when the town starts to understand the truth, a new threat rises, one that could rip this family apart forever. When the world turns against them, will this family's courage be enough to survive and prove everyone wrong? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The autumn air nipped at Ridge Maddox's fingers as he knelt before little Ava Brooks outside the mountain town courthouse. Her dark curls bounced as she fidgeted, making it harder for him to line up the tiny pearl buttons on her lavender sweater. "Hold still, sweetheart," Ridge said softly, his large hands moving with surprising gentleness. Years of combat medical training had taught him steady fingers, but buttoning a 4-year-old's sweater required a different kind of precision. "Is cold," Ava mumbled, bouncing on her patent leather shoes. "Almost done." Ridge secured the last button and smiled at her. "There we go. Perfect." Behind them, Ava's older siblings huddled together on the courthouse steps, their whispers carrying on the crisp morning breeze. "Those people keep looking at us," 12-year-old Marcus muttered to his sister Jasmine. Ridge glanced up, catching the stares of passing townspeople who quickly averted their eyes. He'd grown used to the looks over the past months. The ex-combat medic turned biker wasn't exactly what most folks expected to see outside the courthouse at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, especially not in his pressed black shirt and dress pants. The courthouse door opened, and Ridge's heart skipped as Talia stepped out. Her cream-colored dress caught the early sunlight, making her dark skin glow. She'd woven tiny white flowers into her braids, and her smile lit up her whole face when she saw Ridge helping Ava. "Ready?" she asked, reaching for his hand. Ridge stood, lifting Ava into his arms. "Been ready my whole life without knowing it." The ceremony itself was brief, just the basics required by law, witnessed by Ridge's closest biker brother and Talia's 5 children. But when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Ridge felt something shift and settle in his chest, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. As they stepped out of the courthouse, the whispers began. Ridge could see old Mr. Henderson and his cronies outside the barbershop across the street, shaking their heads in disapproval. A cluster of women in their Sunday best huddled near the courthouse garden, whispering behind gloved hands and shooting furtive glances at the newly blended family. "Well, if it ain't the man surrendering his freedom," called out Buck, one of the newer members of Ridge's motorcycle club, as he passed by on his bike. He meant it as a joke, but Ridge noticed Talia's hand tighten in his. Ridge stopped walking and turned to face the children. Marcus, Jasmine, 10-year-old twins, Devin and Darius, and little Ava. He got down on one knee, still holding Talia's hand. "I want you all to know something," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I'm Ridge Maddox, and I'm your dad now, if you'll have me. Not to replace anyone, but to add more love to this family. That's not surrendering freedom. That's finding it." Marcus studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. The twins exchanged looks, then broke into matching grins. Jasmine wiped at her eyes, trying to hide her tears, and Ava simply wrapped her arms around Ridge's neck. "Can we have pizza?" Devin asked, breaking the emotional moment. Ridge laughed, standing up with Ava still in his arms. "Yeah, buddy. We can have pizza." Later that evening, their new combined home hummed with the controlled chaos of family life. Empty pizza boxes littered the kitchen counter while Ridge knelt on the bedroom floor, surrounded by pieces of bunk beds. The instructions spread before him might as well have been written in ancient Greek. "Pass me that screwdriver?" he asked Marcus, who had been quietly watching from the doorway. The boy handed him the tool, then sat down cross-legged nearby. "Mom says you were a combat medic." "That's right. So you know how to save lives and stuff?" Ridge paused in his work, giving Marcus his full attention. "I do. And I want you to know that includes protecting this family no matter what." Marcus nodded, picking up a screw and turning it in his fingers. "Cool. Can I help with the beds?" "Wouldn't have it any other way." In the next room, Talia's voice floated through the walls as she read bedtime stories to the younger kids. Ridge and Marcus worked together, the rhythmic sound of their tools mixing with Talia's gentle storytelling and the twins' occasional laughter. By the time the bunk beds were assembled and all 5 children were tucked in, Ridge and Talia barely had energy to change into their pajamas. They fell into bed together, physically exhausted but hearts full. "Thank you," Talia whispered in the darkness, "for loving us so completely." Ridge pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Thank you for giving me a family." They drifted off to sleep, their breaths falling into sync, wrapped in the peace of their first night as husband and wife. The judgment of the town seemed far away in that moment, unable to touch the warmth of their combined love. They couldn't know how the whispers would grow into shouts, how the stares would sharpen into accusations, or how their newfound happiness would soon be tested. For now they slept, their dreams filled with the promise of tomorrow. All around them, their mountain town settled into its own Saturday night routine. The barbershop closed up, the church ladies returned home to their families, and the bikers rumbled through quiet streets. But in the Maddox household, something new and beautiful had taken root. A family forged not by blood, but by choice and love. Ridge's last conscious thought before sleep took him was that he'd finally found what he'd been searching for since returning from combat. Not just a purpose, but a home. The steady breathing of his wife beside him and the occasional soft sounds from the children's rooms created a symphony of belonging that soothed his warrior's heart. The soft golden light of dawn had barely begun to peek through the kitchen windows when Ridge quietly slipped out of bed. He moved with the practiced stealth of his military days, careful not to wake Talia as he padded down the hallway of their home. The house was peacefully quiet, filled only with the gentle sounds of sleeping children and the distant chirp of early morning birds. In the kitchen, Ridge moved with purpose, pulling out lunchboxes and laying them in a neat row on the counter. He'd memorized each child's preferences during their courtship. Marcus couldn't stand mayonnaise. The twins loved extra cheese on their sandwiches. Jasmine only ate the crusts if they were cut off, and little Ava needed her fruits cut into small, manageable pieces. The smell of bacon soon filled the air as Ridge worked, methodically preparing breakfast while simultaneously assembling lunches. He checked the calendar Talia kept on the fridge, noting any special activities or requirements for the day. The coffee maker gurgled softly in the background, its aroma mixing with the breakfast smells. Footsteps on the stairs made him look up. Talia stood in the doorway, still in her robe, her eyes wide with surprise as she took in the scene before her. Ridge at the stove, lunchboxes packed, backpacks lined up by the door with homework already checked and tucked away. "Good morning," he said softly, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "You," Talia's voice caught. You did all this? Ridge nodded, adding the pancake to an already impressive stack. Figured you could use the help. Plus, I like keeping busy. Talia moved closer, touching the perfectly packed lunches with trembling fingers. I haven't seen… She stopped, swallowing hard. Not since James passed. Ridge gently pulled her into a one-armed hug, letting her lean against him while he continued cooking. Well, get used to it. This is what family does. The children began trickling downstairs, drawn by the smell of breakfast. Ava appeared first, her curls wild from sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Ridge paused his cooking to help her with her shoes, double-knotting the laces just the way she liked. Thank you, Daddy Ridge, she said sleepily, and Ridge's heart swelled at the name. The twins thundered down next, followed by a yawning Jasmine and a more reserved Micah. They gathered around the table, their usual morning chaos somehow more organized under Ridge's quiet guidance. He moved among them, pouring juice, adjusting collars, and ensuring everyone had what they needed. The morning drive to school was a carefully orchestrated operation. Ridge had mapped out the most efficient route to drop off each child at their respective schools, timing it perfectly to avoid tardiness. As they pulled up to the high school, he caught Micah's eye in the rearview mirror. Remember, son, workshop after school. Got some things I want to teach you? Micah nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Yes, sir. After the last child was safely delivered to school, Ridge drove to his motorcycle repair shop, spending the morning preparing for Micah's lesson. He set up a basic first aid station, drawing from his combat medic experience to create realistic but age-appropriate scenarios. When Micah arrived after school, Ridge was ready. First rule of emergency response, he began, is staying calm under pressure. Everything else builds from there. For the next 2 hours, Ridge guided Micah through basic first aid techniques, teaching him how to assess situations, maintain composure, and make quick decisions. The boy proved to be a natural, his hands steady as he practiced bandaging, and his questions thoughtful and precise. You've got good instincts, Ridge told him, watching Micah perfectly execute a pressure bandage. Just like your mom, level-headed when it counts. Micah's face lit up at the comparison, though he tried to hide it. Thanks, Dad. The word hung between them for a moment, new and precious, before Ridge squeezed his shoulder and they returned to their lesson. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Peterson, who had been one of the most vocal critics of the marriage, stepped onto her porch to water her plants. She paused, watering can suspended in mid-air, as she watched Ridge's truck pull up to the house. The children piled out in an orderly fashion, calling cheerful goodbyes to friends and greeting Ridge with obvious affection. Dad, can you help with my science project? Devin asked, while Darius showed off a good grade on his math test. Mr. Johnson, another neighbor who had predicted disaster, wandered over to check his mail, clearly surprised by the scene of domestic harmony playing out before him. Instead of the chaos and rebellion he'd expected, he saw Ridge patiently listening to each child's day, helping carry projects and backpacks, all while keeping an eye on Ava as she showed him her new skip-counting song. As the afternoon sun began to soften, Ridge suggested a trip to the park. The children cheered, and soon the family was walking together down the tree-lined streets. At the playground, Ridge pushed Ava on the swings, while Talia watched the twins on the monkey bars. Micah and Jasmine played basketball nearby, their laughter carrying across the park. Other families were there too, and while some still stared and whispered, the children seemed oblivious to it all. Their joy was too big to be contained, their laughter too genuine to be dampened by others' judgment. Ridge joined the basketball game, teaching Jasmine how to improve her shot while Micah playfully trash-talked them both. The sky had turned a deep purple by the time they headed home, streetlights flickering on one by one. Ava rode on Ridge's shoulders, half asleep, while the twins raced ahead and doubled back, their energy somehow still not depleted. Talia walked beside her new husband, their hands clasped together, watching their blended family move through the evening light. That night, after the children were tucked in and Ridge was doing one final check of the house's locks, Talia knelt beside their bed. Her prayer was simple but heartfelt, thanking God for bringing Ridge into their lives and asking for strength as they built their future together. As she finished, she heard Ridge's quiet footsteps approaching and smiled, knowing in her heart that the town's dire predictions would prove wrong. They had something special here, something real and precious and worth fighting for. The morning started like any other in the Maddox household. Ridge was up before dawn, carefully measuring coffee grounds while bacon sizzled in the cast-iron skillet. The familiar rhythm of footsteps overhead signaled the children were beginning to stir. Talia emerged first, wrapping her arms around Ridge's waist as he flipped pancakes. "Something smells wonderful," she murmured, reaching for the coffee pot. One by one, the children filtered into the kitchen, drawn by the sounds and smells of breakfast. 15-year-old Micah helped his younger siblings get settled, while 13-year-old Jasmine poured juice for everyone. The twins, Devin and Darius, age 8, argued good-naturedly over who would get the first pancake, and 4-year-old Ava clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit while Ridge tied her shoes. "Remember your science project," Talia reminded Devin as she packed lunches. "And Jasmine, don't forget your band practice after school." Ridge drove the morning carpool route with practiced efficiency, dropping each child at their respective schools. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine tasks: laundry for Talia, motorcycle repairs for Ridge, and the usual household chores that came with managing a family of 7. It wasn't until late afternoon, just before the children were due home, that everything changed. The mail truck rumbled down their street later than usual. Talia collected the stack of envelopes, sorting through bills and advertisements until she found a certified letter addressed to her. The return address made her blood run cold, her late husband's family law firm in Atlanta. Her hands trembled as she signed for the letter. Inside, she found several pages of legal documents, the words swimming before her eyes. Petition for custody, concerns about living environment, unstable household, dangerous associations. The kitchen chair scraped against the floor as Talia sank into it, tears already falling. Ridge heard the sound from the garage and came in, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Honey, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak, just handed him the letter. Ridge knelt beside her chair, his weathered hands gentle as they took the papers. His jaw tightened as he read each line carefully, his expression growing darker. "They're trying to take Devin and Ava," Talia finally managed, her voice breaking. "They're saying you're unstable, that it's not safe here because you're a biker. They're saying—" "Shh," Ridge soothed, pulling her close. "We're not letting anyone take our kids anywhere." The front door burst open then, bringing the usual after-school chaos. But the children stopped short when they saw their mother's tears and Ridge's serious expression. "Mom?" Micah asked, protective instinct kicking in. "What happened?" Ridge stood, gathering all 5 children close. "Come here, kids. We need to talk about something important." They settled in the living room, the younger ones clustering around Talia, while Micah and Jasmine perched tensely on the armchair. "Your mother got a letter today," Ridge began carefully, "from some relatives who think they know what's best for this family. But I want you all to hear something very clearly. Nothing is going to separate this family. Nothing." "Is it because you ride motorcycles?" Devin asked quietly. "Mrs. Thompson at church said bikers are dangerous." Ridge's heart clenched but he kept his voice steady. Some people judge what they don't understand. But you kids know me. Have I ever been dangerous to you? 5 heads shook firmly. Are they trying to take us away? Ava's small voice quavered as she clutched her rabbit tighter. Talia pulled her youngest onto her lap. Nobody is taking anyone away, baby. We promise. But word spread through their small town like wildfire. By evening, Ridge could hear the whispers as he picked up takeout for dinner. Old rumors about his military service, suggestions about anger management issues, dark hints about his biker gang connections. Did you hear about his temper? One woman stage whispered to another at the diner counter. I heard he once. Ridge collected their food and left without acknowledging the gossip, though his knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he drove home. After dinner, while Talia handled the bedtime routine, Ridge retreated to his office to make phone calls. The family lawyer's voice was reassuring, but realistic. They don't have a case, Ridge, the attorney said. But they have money and influence. We'll need to be prepared. Upstairs, Talia moved from room to room, tucking in children and soothing fears. Everything will be okay, she promised each one, though her voice shook slightly. Mom? Jasmine caught her hand as she turned to leave. We won't let them take Devin and Ava. We're family now. Talia hugged her daughter tight, grateful for the strength in her children. When she finally made it to their bedroom, Ridge was already there, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked up as she entered, his eyes fierce despite the fear she could see lurking in them. I meant what I said, he told her, pulling her close. Anyone who wants to take our kids will have to go through me first. They lay awake long after midnight, holding each other in the darkness. Neither spoke of the worry that kept them from sleep, or the legal battle that loomed ahead. Instead, they listened to the quiet sounds of their sleeping children and drew strength from each other's presence, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges to face together. The clock on their bedside table ticked past 1 o'clock in the morning, then 2, as they lay there with their fears and their love, equal measures of both keeping them awake in the darkness. The morning dawned harsh and cold, with a bitter wind that cut through their jackets as Ridge and Talia hurried from the parking lot to their lawyer's office downtown. Talia clutched Ridge's arm, as much for emotional support as protection from the biting gusts that whipped around the street corners. It'll be okay, Ridge murmured, though his own stomach churned with anxiety. The brass nameplate on attorney David Morgan's door gleamed dully as they entered the warm office. Morgan didn't waste time on pleasantries. I'll be direct, he said, shuffling through the custody threat paperwork. This is going to be an uphill battle. The Brooks relatives have considerable resources and social connections. They're painting Ridge as unstable due to his military background and current lifestyle choices. Talia's hand found Ridge's under the desk. But that's ridiculous. Ridge is the most stable influence these children have had since their father died. Unfortunately, perception matters more than reality in cases like this, Morgan explained, removing his reading glasses. We're looking at a lengthy legal process, 6 months minimum, possibly stretching beyond a year. And it won't be cheap. Ridge leaned forward. Money doesn't matter. What matters is keeping our family together. The attorney nodded grimly. Then we need to start building your case immediately. Document everything. School attendance, doctor visits, daily routines, behavioral improvements. We need to show the court that these children are thriving in your care. The wind had picked up even more by the time they left, causing Talia to shiver, despite her warm coat. Ridge wrapped an arm around her shoulders as they walked to their car. We'll figure this out, he promised, one step at a time. Back home, Ridge immediately set up a makeshift office in the corner of their family room. He pulled out notebooks, started creating spreadsheets on his laptop, and began meticulously documenting their family life. 8:15 a.m., Devin completed mathematics homework before school, he muttered as he typed. 9:30 a.m., Ava's preschool reports improved sharing behavior. Talia watched him work while folding laundry nearby. You're really good at this organized documentation thing. Military training, he replied without looking up. Everything gets logged, everything gets tracked. Through the open window, they could hear voices from the neighbor's yard. Mrs. Peterson was talking loudly enough to ensure her words carried. I just don't understand how she could expose those poor children to that kind of element, the woman was saying. Everyone knows what those biker types are really like. Talia saw Ridge's shoulders tense, but he kept typing, refusing to acknowledge the deliberate provocation. A few minutes later, another neighbor cornered Talia as she collected the mail. I feel I should warn you, the woman said, her voice dripping with false concern. Bikers can't be trusted with children. I've read articles about their violent tendencies. Talia straightened her spine. Thank you for your concern, but my husband is the most trustworthy man I know. Inside, Ridge had moved on to planning the evening's activities. He gathered the children in the backyard after dinner, Micah looking particularly eager to learn. Today we're going to talk about staying safe, Ridge began, his voice calm but serious. Sometimes life throws unexpected situations at us, and we need to know how to handle them. He started with the basics, identifying safe zones in their neighborhood, recognizing trusted adults, and establishing emergency meeting points. The younger children turned it into a game, but Micah absorbed every word with intense concentration. Remember, Ridge emphasized, clear thinking is your best tool in any emergency. Panic clouds judgment. Stay calm, assess the situation, then act. They practiced various scenarios: what to do if separated at the mall, how to signal for help without drawing attention, basic first aid techniques. Ridge watched proudly as Micah helped demonstrate proper bandaging to his younger siblings. You're really good at this, he told the teenager quietly. You've got natural leadership ability. Micah's face glowed at the praise. Thanks, Dad. The wind picked up as evening settled in, rattling the windows and creating eerie whistles through the tree branches. Ridge took extra time with bedtime routines, making sure each child felt secure despite the unsettling sounds outside. In Devin's room, he checked under the bed and in the closet. All clear. Buddy, nothing but your soccer gear in here. For Jasmine, he adjusted her nightlight to cast friendly shadows on the wall. Remember what we practiced today? You're smart and capable. Nothing to fear. Ava needed extra cuddles and 2 stories before her eyes started drooping. You're safe, Princess. Daddy's right here. Sarah received a gentle hair ruffle and a reminder about tomorrow's science project. Got all your materials ready? That's my girl. Finally, Ridge stopped by Micah's room, where the teenager was already in bed reading. Good work today, son. You really helped with the little ones. Thanks, Micah replied, then hesitated. Dad? We're not going to let them take Devin and Ava, right? Not a chance, Ridge assured him firmly. We protect our own. Outside, the wind continued its assault on the windows, branches scraping against the glass like skeletal fingers. But inside each room, Ridge had created a bubble of security, a sense of safety that helped each child drift off to sleep despite the howling darkness beyond their walls. As he walked downstairs to join Talia, Ridge could hear the wind's mournful keening growing stronger, as if nature itself was warning of storms yet to come, both literal and metaphorical. But he squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. His family was worth any fight. The morning started like any other school day in their household. Ridge moved through their morning routine with military precision, making sure each child had everything they needed. "Lunchboxes?" he called out, standing by the kitchen counter. "Check," came the chorus of responses. "Homework folders?" "Got it." "Permission slips?" "Right here, Dad." Sarah waved her paper in the air. Talia watched from the doorway, coffee cup in hand, as Ridge orchestrated their departure. In just a few weeks, he had memorized each child's schedule and needs. Even little Ava knew exactly where to put her tiny backpack for inspection. The school drop-offs went smoothly, with Micah being the last to hop out of their family van. "Remember, I'm coming home early today for that science project," he said, adjusting his backpack. "Got it, son. Be careful on your bike," Ridge replied, watching until Micah disappeared into the school building. The morning passed quietly, but everything changed around 12:30 in the afternoon. Micah was pedaling his bike past Miller's Hardware when he noticed a crowd gathering. An elderly man, Mr. Thompson from the bank, lay crumpled on the sidewalk, his face an alarming shade of gray. People stood around uncertainly. Someone was on the phone with 911, but nobody seemed to know what to do. Micah's heart started racing, but Ridge's voice echoed in his head. "Stay calm, assess the situation, then act." Dropping his bike, Micah pushed through the crowd. "I know first aid," he announced, trying to keep his voice steady despite his nerves. "Please give him some space." Kneeling beside Mr. Thompson, Micah remembered Ridge's training. "Check for responsiveness first." "Sir, can you hear me?" No response. Micah placed 2 fingers on the man's neck, finding a weak pulse. The man's chest barely moved with shallow breaths. "Head tilt, chin lift," Micah muttered to himself, carefully positioning Mr. Thompson's head to open his airway. He checked for breathing again. Still present, but labored. "Recovery position," he said aloud, carefully rolling the elderly man onto his side, making sure his airway stayed clear. Ridge had made him practice this move dozens of times. Mrs. Miller from the hardware store knelt beside him. "What can I do to help?" "Could you time his breathing rate?" Micah asked, remembering Ridge's emphasis on gathering vital signs. "Count how many breaths he takes in 15 seconds. The wail of approaching sirens filled the air just as Mr. Thompson's eyes fluttered open. He tried to move, but Micah placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Please stay still, sir. Help is almost here." The paramedics arrived moments later, and Micah delivered a clear report. Patient unconscious approximately 3 minutes, pulse present but weak, breathing shallow at 8 breaths per minute. No obvious injuries noted. He regained consciousness about 30 seconds ago. The lead paramedic raised his eyebrows, impressed. "That's exactly what we needed to know, son. You did good work here." As they loaded Mr. Thompson into the ambulance, Officer Martinez approached. "We'll need a statement from you, young man. Mind coming down to the station?" "I should call my dad first," Micah replied, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him. Word spread through the small town like wildfire. By the time Ridge pulled up to the police station, people were already talking. "Did you hear? That biker's kid saved old Mr. Thompson's life." Inside the station, Micah sat straight-backed in a chair, giving his statement clearly and carefully. Ridge stood in the doorway, watching with pride as his son handled himself with remarkable maturity. "Your boy did everything right," Officer Martinez told Ridge. "Kept his head, followed proper procedures. Where'd he learn all that?" "I've been teaching him," Ridge replied quietly. "Ex-combat medic." The officer nodded thoughtfully, looking at Ridge with new respect. "Well, you taught him well. Mr. Thompson's family is mighty grateful." As they walked to the car, several people on the street nodded to Ridge. Not the usual quick, avoiding glances, but real acknowledgement. One woman even smiled. At home that evening, the younger children couldn't stop talking about their heroic big brother. Even 4-year-old Ava tried to practice rescue breathing on her teddy bear. "Micah's a hero," Devin announced proudly at dinner. "Yeah, everyone at school was talking about it," Sarah added. "Jenny Miller said her mom saw the whole thing." Ridge cleared his throat. "Micah did good work today, but remember what we talked about. Regarding handling emergencies?" "Stay calm, think clear, be humble," Micah recited, though he couldn't completely hide his smile. "That's right," Ridge nodded. "One good action doesn't define us. It's the consistent choices we make every day that matter." Later, while doing dishes, Talia wiped tears from her eyes. Ridge wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "He made me so proud today," she whispered. "They all make me proud, but seeing him use what you've taught him to help someone." "He's a good kid," Ridge agreed. "They all are." After the kids were in bed, Ridge stepped outside onto their back porch. The night air felt unusually dry, and the wind carried a hint of something that made his combat-trained instincts tingle. He walked the property line, noting how the brush crackled under his boots. The mountains loomed dark against the star-filled sky, and everything looked peaceful. But Ridge couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He touched a branch of sagebrush, and it crumbled in his fingers. Too dry, too brittle. His eyes scanned the horizon, where the mountains met the sky. Everything looked calm, but years of combat had taught him that calm could be deceptive. Sometimes the quiet itself was a warning. The next morning brought an unsettling stillness to the mountain town. Ridge stepped onto the front porch at sunrise, coffee mug in hand, and immediately tensed. The air felt wrong, too hot, too dry for early spring. A faint haze hung in the distance, carrying the ghost of wood smoke on the breeze. Inside, Talia noticed his concern as she packed school lunches. "Everything okay?" "Just checking the weather," Ridge said, but his eyes kept drifting to the western ridge. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every nerve was on alert. By midday, his fears proved justified. Fire trucks raced past their house, sirens wailing, heading toward a column of smoke rising from the western slopes. Ridge watched from their yard as firefighters quickly contained the brush fire, but he recognized the grim set of their faces when they returned to the station. Fire Captain Reyes caught his eye as he drove past, giving Ridge a knowing nod. They'd both seen conditions like this before, the perfect storm of drought, heat, and wind that could turn a spark into an inferno. That evening, Ridge gathered the family in the living room. "We need to talk about fire safety," he began, pulling out his old military backpack. "Are we going camping?" 7-year-old Devin asked excitedly. "No, buddy. We're making emergency bags." Ridge started laying out supplies: water bottles, energy bars, first aid kits, flashlights, and batteries. "Everyone gets their own bag, and everyone needs to know how to use everything in it." He demonstrated how to wet towels and hold them over their faces for smoke protection. 15-year-old Micah, still riding high from his recent first aid success, took detailed notes. Even 4-year-old Ava paid attention, practicing with her little purple washcloth. "This is serious business," Ridge explained, spreading a topographical map across the coffee table. "Talia, honey, I need you to memorize these routes. If we get separated, these are our meeting points." Sarah, their 12-year-old, traced the evacuation paths with her finger. "Like treasure map X's," she said, trying to make it feel less scary for her younger siblings. The next morning at church, Ridge noticed the sideways glances and whispered conversations. Mrs. Peterson's voice carried across the fellowship hall. "Did you hear? That biker's got those poor children practicing for the apocalypse." "Paranoid, if you ask me," Mr. Jenkins replied. "Trying to scare everyone for attention." Talia's shoulders tensed, but Ridge squeezed her hand. "Let them talk," he murmured. "Better prepared than sorry." That afternoon, he caught 10-year-old Marcus showing his friends his emergency bag during a playdate. The other kids' parents quickly called them home, shooting disapproving looks at the house. "Why don't they believe us, Dad?" Marcus asked, hurt evident in his voice. Ridge knelt down to his level. "Sometimes people don't want to think about scary things, but being prepared doesn't mean being scared. It means being strong." The following day, Ridge noticed more smoke signals. Dead vegetation crackling underfoot, branches snapping too easily, the way the mountain air shimmered with heat. He checked and rechecked the children's emergency bags, adding dust masks and extra water bottles. The neighbors watched from their porches, shaking their heads. "Weather's always dry this time of year," they said. "He's got those kids all worked up over nothing." That evening, as Talia cleared the dinner dishes and the kids started their bedtime routines, Ridge felt the wind shift. The change was subtle at first, just a stronger gust that rattled the windows, then another, and another. He stepped outside, scanning the darkening horizon. The familiar scent hit him immediately, stronger now, unmistakable. Not the gentle whisper of wood smoke from a campfire, but the acrid bite of a major burn. His combat instincts kicked into high alert as he watched the wind toss treetops against the twilight sky. Sarah appeared in the doorway, clutching her emergency bag. "Dad, is it time?" Ridge turned to answer, but before he could speak, a new gust of wind brought the smell of danger stronger than ever. The western sky had taken on an ominous orange glow. Inside, he could hear Talia helping Ava with her pajamas, the other kids brushing teeth and gathering their things for school tomorrow. They'd taken his warnings seriously, practiced their drills without complaint, trusted his judgment even when the town mocked them. Now, as the wind picked up speed and the scent of smoke grew stronger, Ridge knew their preparation might soon be put to the test. He took one last look at the horizon, where the orange glow was intensifying against the darkening sky. The wind whipped his jacket, carrying with it the unmistakable warning of approaching fire. Everything he'd learned in combat zones, everything his instincts were screaming, it all pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't just another brush fire. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The sunrise painted an eerie picture across the mountain valley. Ridge Maddox stood at his bedroom window, watching the sky transform into a red-gold haze that seemed to glow from within. His military-trained instincts had kept him restless all night, and now he knew why. The air itself felt wrong, thick with smoke and electric with tension. The radio crackled to life on his nightstand. "Breaking news! The Carter Ridge fire has broken containment lines. Residents in the Western Valley should prepare for possible evacuation." Ridge was already moving. "Talia," he called softly, touching his wife's shoulder. "It's time." She sat up immediately, years of single motherhood having taught her to wake fully alert. "How bad?" "Bad enough. Let's get the kids moving." They split up, moving through the house with practiced efficiency. Ridge's combat experience had taught him that panic was the enemy. Calm, decisive action was what saved lives. "Everyone up!" Talia called, her voice steady despite the fear Ridge could see in her eyes. "Emergency bags, just like we practiced." The children responded with remarkable composure. 15-year-old Micah immediately began helping his younger siblings, checking their bags against the lists they'd made. 12-year-old Sarah grabbed the family photo albums, while 10-year-old Marcus helped 7-year-old Devin tie his shoes. Even 4-year-old Ava clutched her purple backpack, filled with essentials and one carefully chosen stuffed animal. "Remember what we talked about," Ridge said as he helped them double-check their supplies. This isn't a drill, but we're prepared. We stay calm, we stay together, we help others if we can. While Talia gathered important documents and extra water, Ridge loaded their truck and then began checking on neighbors. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly widow next door, needed help gathering her medications. The Martinez family had a broken-down car that Ridge quickly jumped with cables from his workshop. By 11 o'clock that morning, the sky had darkened to an apocalyptic orange. Embers began drifting into town like deadly snowflakes, settling on rooftops and dry grass. Fire sirens wailed in the distance. "All right, team." Ridge gathered his family in their driveway. "We've practiced this. Micah, you're with me. We'll check houses on the north side. Sarah, Marcus, Devin, you three help direct people to the community center. Talia, can you take Ava and coordinate supplies there?" Talia nodded, pulling him close for a quick kiss. "Be careful," she whispered. "Always am," he promised, then turned to address the whole family. "Everyone keep your masks on. If you feel overwhelmed, take a break. Stay hydrated. We help where we can, but no unnecessary risks." The next several hours passed in a blur of smoke and sweat. Ridge and Micah moved house to house, checking for stragglers and helping people evacuate. The boy showed remarkable composure, clearly putting his first aid training to use as he helped an asthmatic child use his inhaler and bandaged a cut on a panicked mother's arm. At the community center, Sarah, Marcus, and Devin worked tirelessly, directing traffic and helping distribute water bottles. Their voices were hoarse from shouting directions, but they never complained. Talia and Ava organized supplies, turning the community center's gymnasium into an efficient command post. Fire Captain Reyes found Ridge around mid-afternoon. "Heard you were a combat medic," he said, wiping soot from his face. "Could use your help with triage if you're willing." Ridge nodded, quickly explaining the situation to Micah. "Stay with your mother. Help coordinate at the center." "No way," Micah protested. "I can help. You taught me how." Ridge studied his stepson's determined face and saw something of himself there, the need to be useful, to make a difference. "All right," he agreed, "but you follow my lead exactly." The next few hours tested them all. Ridge worked alongside the firefighters, treating smoke inhalation and minor burns, while Micah assisted, handling basic first aid so Ridge could focus on more serious cases. The boys' calm demeanor and steady hands impressed even the veteran firefighters. As the sun began to set, casting an otherworldly red glow through the smoke, a desperate call came over the radio. 2 hikers were trapped on Carter's Trail, cut off by a collapsed, burning tree. "That's less than a mile from here," Ridge said, already grabbing his medical kit. "I know those trails." "Dad, I'm coming too," Micah insisted. And this time, Ridge didn't argue. They'd need all the help they could get. They found the hikers huddled behind a rock formation, coughing and scared but alive. The young couple had been trying to evacuate their campsite when the tree came down, blocking their path back to the main road. "We'll get you out," Ridge assured them, quickly assessing their condition. The woman had a sprained ankle, and both were suffering from smoke inhalation. Working together, Ridge and Micah improvised a stretcher using their emergency blankets and 2 sturdy branches. "Just like we practiced," Ridge encouraged, as they carefully lifted the injured woman. The male hiker helped support his partner's weight, while Micah led the way, finding the safest path through the smoke-filled forest. It took them nearly an hour to reach safety, their lungs burning from the toxic air despite their masks. But when they finally emerged from the forest's edge, the waiting paramedics broke into applause. As night fell, the Maddox family regrouped at the community center. They were exhausted, covered in soot, and smelling of smoke, but all present and accounted for. Talia wrapped Ridge and Micah in fierce hugs, not caring about the grime. "The fire's still coming," Captain Reyes warned, joining their family circle, It'll burn through the night, but thanks to your family's help, we've got everyone evacuated and accounted for." Ridge looked around at his soot-stained family, at Micah's proud exhaustion, Sarah's determined focus as she continued organizing supplies, Marcus and Devon sharing their water with other children, little Ava falling asleep in Talia's lap. The community center's emergency lights cast everything in a dim glow, and through the windows, they could see the fire's orange reflection growing brighter against the darkening sky. They were tired, dirty, and uncertain of what the night would bring. But they were together, and they had helped their community when it mattered most. Ridge pulled Talia and the children close, knowing the danger wasn't over, but feeling a fierce pride in how his family had risen to meet it. Dawn broke over the valley, but the sun remained a dim orange disk behind thick curtains of smoke. Ridge Maddox stood outside the community center, watching emergency vehicles move through the haze like ghost ships. His throat felt raw, and his eyes burned. But there was work to be done. Inside the gymnasium, Talia had already transformed one corner into an efficient food distribution station. She moved with purpose, directing volunteers and organizing supplies with the practiced ease of someone used to managing a large family. "We need more bottled water over here," she called out, her voice hoarse but steady. "And can someone check if there are any more baby formula containers in the storage room?" The younger Maddox children had found their own ways to help. Sarah and Devon sat in a circle with several displaced toddlers, reading stories and leading simple games to keep their minds off the scary situation. Marcus helped sort donated blankets and clothing, his usual energy channeled into productive tasks. Little Ava, not wanting to be left out, followed her older siblings around with a box of juice boxes, solemnly handing them out to crying children. "It's okay," she would whisper, patting their hands. "My daddy says we're all safe here." Ridge felt his heart swell watching them. In just months, they'd become such a tight unit, each finding their own way to contribute. But his pride was tinged with worry as he thought about the custody threat hanging over them. Micah's voice crackled over the radio Ridge carried. "Dad, we've got reports of 2 elderly residents unaccounted for on Cedar Street. They might have missed the evacuation notices." "Copy that," Ridge responded, already moving toward the door. He found Fire Captain Reyes coordinating with his team. "Captain, my son has some intel on possible missing persons." Reyes nodded grimly. "Your boy's been invaluable. Those evacuation routes you mapped out? They've helped us reach people twice as fast." Together they reviewed Micah's information. The missing couple lived in a small house that sat right along one of the escape routes Ridge had drilled with his family. Within 20 minutes, firefighters located the elderly pair, who had indeed missed the evacuation notices due to hearing problems. They were safely transported to the community center, where Talia immediately got them settled with food and water. As the day progressed, more stories emerged of how the Maddox family's preparation had helped save lives. The paranoid emergency bags Ridge had insisted everyone pack had provided crucial supplies. The evacuation routes he'd memorized with the children had given first responders efficient paths through the chaos. The first aid training he'd given Micah had helped treat dozens of minor injuries, freeing up medical personnel for more serious cases. By late afternoon, a cheer went up from the firefighters' command post. The main fire line had finally been pushed back. The immediate danger was passing. Relief swept through the community center like a cool breeze, and people began to smile for the first time in 24 hours. News vans started arriving as the smoke began to clear. Reporters, drawn by stories of the town's successful evacuation, requested interviews with the family who had helped coordinate so much of the response. A young reporter with carefully styled hair that was quickly wilting in the smoky air approached Ridge. "Sir, we're hearing remarkable stories about your family's role in the emergency response. How did you know to prepare so thoroughly?" Ridge shifted uncomfortably under the camera's glare. Anyone with combat experience knows the value of preparation, he said simply. I just wanted my family to be safe. The reporter turned to Micah, who stood straighter under the attention. You helped save several lives during this crisis. How does that feel? I just did what my dad taught me, Micah responded, glancing at Ridge with obvious pride. He showed us that being ready isn't about fear. It's about being able to help others when they need it most. Talia's interview focused on the community response. We're all family in times like these, she said, her gentle voice carrying conviction. When someone needs help, you help. That's what Ridge has always taught our children. The positive coverage felt like a turning point. Ridge could see it in the way townspeople now met his eyes, offered handshakes, clapped him on the shoulder as they passed. The crazy biker label was falling away, replaced by something closer to respect. But the moment of hope shattered with the arrival of a police cruiser. Officer Martinez stepped out, his face grave as he approached Ridge and Talia. Mrs. Brooks Maddox, he said formally, using Talia's hyphenated name. I have some documents you need to see. Ridge's stomach clenched as he watched Talia read the papers. Her hands began to shake. They're saying we endangered the children, she whispered, her voice breaking. The relatives. They're claiming Ridge deliberately put them at risk by involving them in the emergency response. They're requesting an emergency hearing for immediate custody transfer of Ava and Devon. The joy of their successful crisis response crumbled into ash. Ridge stepped outside the community center, needing air despite the lingering smoke. The mountains loomed in the distance, their slopes scarred black but still standing. They had helped save this town, protected these people, taught their children the value of courage and community service. And now those same actions were being used as weapons against them. He stared at the burned landscape, feeling as if the ground beneath his feet had turned to quicksand. Everything they'd built, every moment of progress, every small victory, none of it seemed to matter in the face of this new threat. The very things that made him proudest of his family were being twisted into reasons to tear them apart. The sun was setting behind the smoke-stained mountains, casting long shadows across the valley they had fought so hard to protect. Ridge stood motionless, his shoulders bearing the weight of a victory that had transformed, in the space of a moment, into his family's greatest vulnerability. The morning after the custody notice dawned eerily quiet. Fine ash drifted down like gray snow, coating everything with a ghostly powder that muffled sounds and dimmed the sunlight. Ridge watched it settle on the windshield as they drove home from the community center, each flake another weight on his heavy heart. At home, the breakfast table felt like a command center before a difficult mission. Ridge and Talia had agreed they needed to tell the children immediately. No secrets, no sugarcoating. The kids sensed something was wrong the moment they sat down. Nobody touched the cereal bowls Talia had set out. We need to talk about something important, Ridge began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. You know how brave and helpful everyone was during the fire? Five heads nodded, but their eyes were wary. Well, Talia continued, reaching for Ridge's hand under the table. Some people think we shouldn't have let you help. Your aunt and uncle on your father's side. She swallowed hard. They're trying to take Ava and Devon away from us. They're saying it wasn't safe for you to be involved in the emergency response. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the room erupted. 15-year-old Micah shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor. That's stupid. We helped save people. 7-year-old Devon burst into tears, launching himself at Ridge and wrapping small arms around his neck. I don't want to go. You're my dad now. 4-year-old Ava didn't fully understand, but she started crying because Devon was crying. She climbed into Ridge's lap, too, pressing her, face against his chest. The middle children, Marcus and Lily, aged 12 and 10, sat frozen in shock. "Nobody's going anywhere," Ridge said firmly, though his throat felt tight. "We're going to fight this. Together, like we do everything else." But later that night, alone in the garage, those brave words felt hollow. Ridge sat on his workbench, staring at the wooden box that held his military medals. He rarely looked at them anymore. They were just pieces of metal that marked times when following orders had intersected with doing the right thing. But tonight, he opened the box, letting the dim light catch on tarnished bronze and silver. Distinguished Service Medal, Combat Medical Badge, various campaign medals. Proof that once upon a time, important people had trusted him with lives. Now he couldn't even protect his own family. The next 2 days moved in slow motion. They tried to maintain normal routines, getting kids to school, helping with homework, making dinner. But everything felt heavier, darker. The lawyer meetings were a blur of terms like emergency hearing and temporary custody order. Ridge went through the motions, answering questions, signing papers, but inside he felt himself withdrawing more with each passing hour. At night, after the kids were in bed, he retreated to the garage. Sometimes he worked on his motorcycle, though his hands moved mechanically, without purpose. Sometimes he just sat, staring at those medals, wondering if the man who earned them was strong enough for this fight. Talia found him there on the third night, hunched over on his workbench, the medal box open beside him. She didn't speak, just pulled up another stool and sat close enough that their shoulders touched. "Maybe they were right about me," Ridge said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "The town, the relatives, all of them. Maybe I'm not enough for these kids." "Look at me," Talia said softly. When he didn't move, she reached up and gently turned his face toward her, her hands warm against his stubbled cheeks. Her eyes were fierce with conviction. "You're not the man they need," she said, and his heart clenched until she finished. "You're the man God sent." Ridge closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw Devon's face lighting up when he helped fix his bike, heard Ava's giggles when he swung her high in the air, remembered Micah's pride after saving that man's life, using the skills Ridge had taught him. He felt Talia's thumbs brush away moisture from under his eyes that he hadn't realized was there. When he opened them again, something had shifted inside him. The doubt wasn't gone, but it had loosened its grip just enough. Just enough for him to straighten his shoulders, just enough to help him stand up again. Talia kept her hands on his face, her touch anchoring him to this moment, to this family, to this fight that was only beginning. The medals gleamed dully in their box, no longer accusations but reminders. He had faced impossible odds before. He had kept going when exhausted, had pushed through when afraid, had found strength when he thought he had none left. He covered her hands with his own, rough palm against smooth skin, and drew in a deep breath that finally reached all the way to his lungs. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more doubts, more fears to face down. But tonight, in this quiet garage with the woman who believed in him more than he believed in himself, he found his footing again. Ridge sat in his lawyer's office, trying to focus on preparation strategies for the upcoming custody hearing. His mind kept drifting to Talia, who had insisted on handling the school drop-offs alone today. "You focus on the meeting," she'd said, kissing his cheek. "We'll be fine." The doorbell rang just after 2:00 that afternoon. Ridge opened it to find Henry Miller, the elderly man Micah had saved outside the hardware store, standing on their porch with an envelope in his trembling hands. "I wrote it all down," Henry said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Every detail of how your boy saved my life. The quick thinking, the calm under pressure. That comes from good parenting, son. The court needs to know that. Before Ridge could properly thank him, 2 more figures appeared at the end of their walkway, the hikers he and Micah had rescued during the wildfire. The young couple looked different now, cleaned up and wearing casual clothes instead of being covered in soot and ash. "We drove 3 hours to be here," the woman said, holding up her own envelope. "We wrote everything down too, how you risked your life to save us, how your whole family worked together during the crisis. You're heroes, all of you." Fire Captain Reyes arrived next, still in uniform from his shift. His presence commanded attention as he handed Ridge a thick manila folder. "Official incident reports," he explained, "plus my personal statement about how your emergency preparedness training and quick action prevented mass casualties. Your family's presence made all the difference that day." Throughout the afternoon, more people arrived. The owner of the grocery store brought security camera footage, showing Ridge teaching the kids first aid in the parking lot. A school teacher delivered a stack of notes from other parents describing how Ridge's children helped their kids stay calm during the evacuation. By evening, their kitchen table was covered in letters, statements, and signed petitions. Talia sat with tears in her eyes, reading them one by one as the kids gathered around. "Listen to this one," she said, her voice warm with wonder. "The Maddox family represents the very best of our community. Their strength, unity, and service during the wildfire proved what we should have seen all along. They belong here, together." Ridge watched as Devon's eyes grew wide. "They're all saying nice things about us?" "Every single one," Ridge assured. Him, ruffling his hair. "The whole town is standing with us." Over the next 2 days, the support grew. The local diner owner organized a letter-writing campaign. Ridge's biker brothers collected video testimonials from emergency responders. Even the church ladies who had once whispered behind gloved hands now brought casseroles along with their written statements of support. Each evening became a family ritual, gathering in the living room, reading the day's letters aloud, watching video messages from neighbors. Ava climbed into everyone's laps, demanding to hear stories again and again about how brave her family had been during the fire. "Remember when Micah helped direct traffic?" Lily asked at dinner on the 3rd night, giggling as she passed the potatoes. "He looked so official." "Not as official as Marcus organizing the water stations," Micah shot back with a grin. "I helped too," Devon proclaimed proudly. "I carried blankets." "You sure did, buddy," Ridge said, his heart full as he watched his family laugh together for the first time in what felt like forever. The weight that had been crushing them began to lift, replaced by something lighter, warmer. That night, as Ridge and Talia tucked each child into bed, there were no tears, no fearful questions about being taken away. Instead, Ava asked for an extra story. Marcus talked about his science project. Lily made plans for the weekend. When they finally settled into their own bed, Talia curled into Ridge's side. "They feel safe again," she whispered. "The whole town is fighting for us now." Ridge pulled her closer, thinking of all the letters downstairs, all the voices raised in their defense. The town hadn't just changed its mind about them, it had opened its heart. And in doing so, it had given their children back their sense of security, their laughter, their hope. The morning of the custody hearing dawned clear and crisp. Ridge adjusted his tie in the mirror, a rare sight that made the children giggle despite their nervousness. Talia smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and gathered everyone for a family prayer before they left. At the county courthouse, Ridge and Talia's lawyer began methodically presenting their case. One by one, the evidence mounted. Fire Captain Reyes testified about Ridge's crucial role during the wildfire, describing how his military medical training and quick thinking had saved multiple lives. Teachers spoke about the children's improved grades and confidence since Ridge entered their lives. Henry Miller, still moving slowly from his recent health scare, stood proudly to recount how Micah had saved his life using the first aid skills Ridge had taught him. "That boy knew exactly what to do," Henry declared, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "Those children aren't just safe, they're being raised to help others." The opposing relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats as neighbor after neighbor praised the Maddox family's character. When presented with the stack of community testimonials, letters, and video statements, they struggled to maintain their accusations of instability. The judge, a stern-faced woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed everything carefully. Her ruling came with unwavering certainty. These children are clearly thriving in a stable, loving, well-prepared household. The petition for custody change is denied. Talia burst into tears of relief, while Ridge pulled her close. The children, watching from the gallery with their aunt, rushed forward to embrace their parents. News of the verdict spread through town like wildfire. By the time Ridge turned their truck onto their street, they could see a crowd gathered in their driveway. Neighbors stood holding casserole dishes and handmade signs reading, "Welcome home Maddox family," and "Our heroes." Ridge parked, overwhelmed by the sight. Mrs. Peterson, who had once crossed the street to avoid him, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "We were wrong about you," she said, pulling him into a surprising hug. So terribly wrong. The elderly couple from 2 doors down brought forward their famous lasagna. The local firefighters showed up in their off-duty clothes, taking turns high-fiving the kids. Even the church ladies who had whispered their judgments now offered heartfelt apologies along with their best comfort food. Ridge's biker brothers stood at the edge of the crowd, grinning proudly as they watched the town embrace the family they had supported all along. As the impromptu celebration continued, Ridge gathered all 5 children into his arms: Micah, Lily, Marcus, Devin, and little Ava. Tears streamed freely down his face as he held them close, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "They didn't break us." The children clung to him, their own tears mixing with laughter as the weight of fear finally lifted from their shoulders. They were home, they were safe, and they were loved, not just by Ridge and Talia, but by an entire community that had learned to see past their prejudices to the truth of what family really means. The years flowed like a gentle river, bringing change and growth to the mountain town and the Maddox family. Where once stood charred earth from the devastating wildfire, fresh pine saplings now reached toward the sky. The blackened scars across the mountainside had transformed into a tapestry of green, nature's testament to resilience and renewal. On a warm summer afternoon, the townsfolk gathered in the newly renovated town square. The air buzzed with excitement as children darted between adults, and familiar faces shared knowing smiles. At the center stood a covered stone monument, waiting to be unveiled. Ridge Maddox stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, his dark hair now streaked with distinguished silver. His eyes filled with pride as he watched his children, no longer small, but grown into capable young people. Micah, now in college studying emergency medicine, stood tall beside his siblings. Lily had become a talented artist, while Marcus excelled in sports. Devin showed promise as a future teacher, and little Ava, not so little anymore, had inherited her father's calm strength. Over the years, Ridge had continued teaching first aid and survival skills to local youth, turning his garage into a community training center. Talia had channeled her experiences into advocacy work, helping other blended families navigate challenging times. Together, they had built something far greater than themselves. Mayor Thompson stepped forward to address the crowd. "Today, we honor those who showed us what true courage means," she announced, her voice carrying across the square. The Maddox Six didn't just save lives during the wildfire. They taught us about judgment, redemption, and the real meaning of family. The cover fell away, revealing a beautiful stone monument. Etched in elegant letters were the words, "Courage isn't born, it's raised." Below the inscription was an artistic rendering of 6 hands joined together. One by one, Ridge's children stepped forward, placing their hands on the cool stone. Several townspeople who had once doubted Ridge approached, offering heartfelt words of gratitude and admitting their past mistakes. Talia slipped her hand into Ridge's, tears glistening in her eyes. "Look at what you built," she whispered, gesturing to their family and the supportive community surrounding them. Ridge gathered his family close as applause filled the square. A humble smile crossed his face as he murmured, "I told you, they couldn't break us." Together, the Maddox family walked down the sunlit town square, their shadows stretching long behind them. United, honored, and forever changed, they had become living proof that love could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the strongest families are the ones forged in fire. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.